Dominic brought structure. Kara brought human truth. He knew how institutions protected themselves. She knew how injured people disappeared inside systems that did not want to see them. Together, they became difficult to dismiss. By the third day, Dominic had renamed her Sherlock Holmes after finding her cross-legged on a chair at 2 a.m, wearing reading glasses, eating mint sweets from a paper napkin, and identifying a discrepancy in the safety update from 7 years earlier. Sherlock Holmes, he said, leaning against the door frame with 2 coffees in his hands. Kara looked over the top of her glasses. How did you know? That's my nickname. She gave that infectious smile. Dominic set the coffee beside her. Would you consider starting a business with me? She did not look up. What kind of business? Investigating irregular and harmful everything. This time she laughed loudly, and the sound moved through the little room like sunlight. There was an ease growing between them now, though neither trusted it fully. Sometimes they reached for the same document at the same time and drew back too quickly. Sometimes one of them began a sentence and the other finished it. Sometimes they looked up from opposite sides of the table and found the other already looking. It unnerved them both. Dominic had known attraction before. He had known admiration, chemistry, convenience, even affection. But this was different. It felt like recognition, as though some quiet part of him had been waiting for a person his mind had not yet imagined. Kara felt it too, though she was better at pretending otherwise. On the 5th evening, when the final disclosure package was assembled, Dominic stood by the window, looking out over the harbour. The sky had turned lavender, and the lights along the water were beginning to shimmer. Kara came to stand beside him. What happens now? She asked. I send this to 3 places at once, he said. Regulators, legal counsel, and a journalist I trust enough to fear slightly. That sounds promising. It is either promising or catastrophic. With this subject, Kara said, those often arrive together. Dominic looked at her. I would like to continue seeing you. Kara turned to him slowly. For the investigation? For the investigation, he said. Then after a pause, and not only for the investigation. The harbour was quiet beyond the glass. Kara's expression softened, but her voice remained careful. Dominic, my life is not simple. I know. I am tired more often than I admit. I know. I can be stubborn, overprotective of my people, suspicious of charming men in expensive coats, and occasionally impossible. I had gathered most of that. She narrowed her eyes. That was not an invitation to agree so quickly. He smiled. No, but it was an opportunity I could not waste. Kara looked away, but she was smiling too. Then she said, very softly, we will see. Dominic accepted that as the gift it was. That night, the disclosure went out. By morning, the first calls began. Bingham and Blaine could no longer pretend the report did not exist. The following afternoon, Dominic visited Kara's home for the first time. He arrived carrying a beautiful orchid plant and a box of exquisite porcelana chocolates imported from Tuscany, both of which seemed suddenly inadequate the moment she opened the door. These are for you, he said, feeling oddly formal. Kara looked from the orchid to the chocolates, then back to him. Dr. Pemberton, she said, are you trying to bribe me with flowers and expensive chocolate? No, he said, I am thanking you with flowers and expensive chocolate. That is a very important distinction. I thought so. She smiled and stepped aside to let him in. Her home was gentler than he had expected. Warm lamps, minimalist, except for the shelves, crowded with books, framed photographs, a vase of fresh flowers on the table, and the faint scent of vanilla and something herbal drifting through the air. It was not grand or showy, nothing on display, not arranged to impress anyone. It felt lived in, safe, hers. Marmalade appeared in the hallway, regarded Dominic with grave suspicion, and then walked away as though unimpressed. That went well, Dominic said. He takes time, Kara replied. Like mother, like son, I can wait. Kara did not reply. She looked down at the orchid in her hands. Thank you, she said. It's beautiful. You're welcome. For a moment there was silence. Not awkward exactly, but almost anticlimactic. The intense urgency of the previous days had ended. The files had been assembled. The disclosure had gone out. The truth was no longer theirs alone to carry. And now here they were, standing in her sitting room with an orchid, a box of chocolates, and all the things neither of them had yet said. Kara placed the plant carefully on a small table near the window, then stood looking out into the garden. Well, she said quietly, there is no taking it back now. No, Dominic said, there isn't. She turned to him then, and for the first time since he had met her, she looked less guarded than tired. Brave, yes, always brave, but tired in a way that reached beneath the professional steadiness, beneath the wit, beneath the titanium backbone. Dominic crossed the room, slowly. I wish I could promise they won't hurt you, he said. Kara gave a small, sad smile. You know better than to make promises you can't keep. I do. Good. But I can promise this. His voice dropped. You won't face it alone. Something in her expression changed. For years Kara had been the one who stayed steady for others, the one who answered the late-night calls, held the frightened, carried the stories, found hope when everyone else had run out of it. She had forgotten, almost, what it felt like to have someone stand in front of her and mean, with every part of himself, let me carry some of this too. Her eyes filled before she could stop them. Dominic. He reached for her hand, giving her time to pull away. She did not. Instead, her fingers closed around his. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Kara stepped closer, and Dominic, who had negotiated with ministers, executives, lawyers, and men who frightened entire rooms into silence, found himself utterly undone by the simple warmth of her hand in his. When he kissed her, it was not hurried or possessive. It was careful at first, almost reverent, as though he understood that this woman had fought too hard, endured too much, and given too much of herself to be approached carelessly. But then Kara's hand rose to his chest, and something in her softened. A feeling moved through her that she had not expected, something bright and aching and alive, something that felt like joy, the kind she had forgotten her body still knew how to feel. Dominic drew back just enough to look at her, and whatever composure he had spent a lifetime perfecting was gone. I accepted that job, he said softly, thinking it would be another contract. Kara's eyes searched his. And somehow it led me to you. She laughed then, but the laugh broke a little as the emotions choked. That is dangerously close to a line from a film. I know. You should be ashamed. I am not. No, she whispered, touching his face. I don't think you are. Kara pulled back and caught her breath. Yes, the joy was there, but alongside it was the old, familiar armor. She looked at him, really looked at him, and the titanium backbone stiffened just a fraction. Dominic, wait. I don't know how to do this. I've spent a decade being a lighthouse. Lighthouses don't get to come inside and sit by the fire. I'm afraid that if I let you carry some of this, I won't know who I am without the weight. She looked away. And I'm afraid of waking up and finding out this was just another negotiation for you. I understand, he said gently. We will go slowly. He looked down at her hands, stroking them, as if he could soothe away her burdens. Then he looked at his, the ones that had signed the contracts that protected and defended. I spent 15 years helping people find the most expensive way to say nothing, he said, his voice roughening. I was so good at the silence that I stopped hearing anything else. Then I heard one of your recordings. You weren't just talking. You were seeing people. I realized then that I hadn't been seen, not really, in a very long time. Thank you, he said, kissing her again. And this time neither of them pretended it was only gratitude or relief or the intensity of shared purpose. It was something else, something neither of them had looked for, something neither of them had expected, and perhaps because of that, something they both recognized at once. The first week after the disclosure was chaos. There were headlines, denials, carefully worded statements, emergency meetings, leaked emails, urgent calls from regulators, and the kind of media attention Bingham and Blaine had spent years trying to prevent. At first, the company did what powerful companies often did. It denied wrongdoing. It patient-blamed. It expressed concern. It promised to review. It questioned interpretation. It warned against misinformation. But the report was too carefully evidenced to dismiss, and the book reviews, patient testimonies, adverse event data, and years of documented accounts provided by Kara and others in the prescribed drug injury community were no longer scattered fragments. Together they formed a picture the public could finally see. For the first time, people who had suffered in silence heard their experience discussed in official language. Iatrogenic injury, tolerance, dependence, dysregulation, misdiagnosis, harm. Kara cried the morning the Drug Administration Advisory Board announced a formal investigation into Navexidone. She did not cry loudly. She sat at her kitchen table, one hand over her mouth, the other resting on Marmalade's warm back, while Dominic stood beside the counter reading the statement from his phone. An independent safety review, he said quietly. Updated prescribing guidance pending. A public call for patient submissions. Kara closed her eyes and shook her head. How many times did they try to tell people? She whispered. I know. How many times were they sent away? Dominic set down the phone and came to sit beside her. I know. She shook her head again, tears slipping down her face. No, Dom, you don't. Not really. He did not flinch from the truth of that. No, he said, not really. But I want to keep learning. That was one of the reasons she had begun to trust him, not because he always knew what to say, because he did not pretend to know what he had not lived. The months that followed, were not simple. Bingham and Blaine fought hard. Dominic was threatened with legal action, accused of breaching confidentiality, and described in one anonymous briefing as a disgruntled consultant seeking attention. Kara was accused of exaggeration, opportunism, emotional manipulation, and, most painfully, frightening vulnerable people. She tried to pretend the attacks did not hurt. Dominic did not believe her. He arranged additional security for her home, not in a grand or theatrical way, but quietly, efficiently, after a package with no return address arrived at her front door. He insisted on a driver when she traveled to hearings. He checked hotel exits, meeting rooms, and parking arrangements with the same calm intensity he had once used to protect corporate reputations. "You do realize," Kara said one evening, watching him test the lock on her back door for the third time, "that I survived perfectly well before you arrived." Dominic looked over his shoulder. "I have no doubt. Then why are you behaving as though I might be stolen by international criminals?" "Because you are valuable." Kara opened her mouth, then closed it again. Dominic returned to the door, pretending not to notice that she was touched. By autumn, the investigation had widened. Internal documents confirmed that concerns about naloxone withdrawal had been raised years earlier. Some safety language had been softened. Some reports had been categorized in ways that made the pattern harder to see. No single document told the whole story, but together they revealed what patients had known in their bodies long before institutions were willing to name it. The patient information leaflet was rewritten. Prescribers were issued urgent guidance on tolerance, dependence, withdrawal reactions, careful prescribing, and safe tapering. Medical training bodies began reviewing educational materials. Pharmacies received updated warnings. A public hearing was scheduled. Then came the announcement no one had dared hope for. An independent patient recovery and compensation fund would be established for those affected, overseen by a panel that included medical experts, legal representatives, and patient advocates. When Kara heard, she cried again. This time, Dominic, too, was deeply moved. Not because money could give people back the years they had lost. It could not. Nothing could do that. But acknowledgement, validation, safety, and truth mattered. And at last, the people Kara had spent years holding up were no longer being told they were imagining it. In October, Kara launched an app called Dr. Soporific for insomnia sufferers. She had meant the name as a joke. Dominic, who had often fallen asleep during her meditations, insisted it was a brilliant brand identity. The app was gentle, simple, and deeply Kara. Bedtime stories, reassurance tracks, calming meditations, brief nighttime messages for people who woke in panic, and a feature that played her voice saying, at random intervals, "You are safe in this moment. Let this minute be enough." To everyone's surprise except Dominic's, it became an instant success. "You realize," he said, watching the download numbers climb, "that Dr. Soporific may become more famous than Dr. Minelli." "That would be ideal," Kara replied. "Dr. Minelli is tired." "Dr. Minelli is also loved." Kara glanced at him. That sounded dangerously sentimental. "I am experimenting with range. Be careful. It may affect your credibility." "With whom?" "People in expensive coats." Dominic looked down at his coat, then back at her. I shall donate it to science. Together, they also began building something neither of them had fully imagined in meeting room 4. The prescription-induced dysfunction helpline started as a document on Kara's laptop titled One Day Maybe. Dominic found it accidentally while helping her to locate a missing file. What is this? He asked. Kara leaned over, saw the file name, and reached to close the laptop. Nothing. That is the least convincing nothing I have ever heard. It's an idea, she said. Too big, too expensive, too complicated. Dominic opened it gently. Inside was a plan for a free international helpline staffed by trained support workers, with signposting for medical care, crisis pathways, tapering-informed resources, caregiver guidance, and compassionate listening for people who had nowhere else to turn. He read the first page in silence. Then he said, "This is not too big." Kara laughed softly. Spoken like a man who has not tried to fund anything charitable. I know people too. They are all exhausted. Then we will find less exhausted people who can contribute. She looked at him, half amused, half overwhelmed. You make that sound simple. It is not simple, he said, but it is possible. By December, the helpline had a small office, a training program, legal guidance, safeguarding procedures, clinical advisors, and enough funding for its first year. Kara trained the first group herself. Dominic watched from the back of the room as she spoke to them about warmth, boundaries, safeguarding and crisis management, active listening, humility, and the sacred responsibility of being trusted by someone in distress. Never make promises you cannot keep, she told them. Never tell people they will be healed by a certain date. Never turn their fear into failure. Offer encouragement, validation, grounded hope. Dominic looked around the room and saw people taking notes as though every word mattered. He thought, not for the first time, that Bingham and Blaine had been right about one thing. Kara Minelli was truly a woman of substance. Not because she was fearless, because she gave frightened people language, dignity, and somewhere to stand. At Christmas, Kara took Dominic to meet her parents. He pretended not to be nervous and failed completely. Her father, retired from diplomatic life, but not from diplomacy itself, studied Dominic over the rim of his glasses for a full 10 seconds before saying, "So, you are the man who blew up that pharmaceutical company." Dominic set down his tea very carefully. "I assisted in bringing forward evidence, sir." Kara's mother smiled. "He is modest and polite. That is a good start. He is also overprotective," Kara said. Her father nodded gravely. "Excellent. Continue." By the end of the visit, Dominic had been given a second slice of fruitcake, asked about his future plans with candid directness, and invited back for Easter. Kara laughed at him all the way to the car. "You looked more frightened in there than you did before the Parliamentary Health Committee." "The Parliamentary Health Committee did not ask whether I understood that you were not a woman to be trifled with." "Well," Kara said, fastening her seatbelt, "do you?" Dominic started the car with increasing clarity. On New Year's Eve, they held a small party for the helpline staff. There were paper hats, too much food, music that made several people dance badly, and a wall covered in anonymous messages from those who had been helped during the helpline's first weeks. "Someone believed me. I did not have to be alone at 3 a.m. You helped me get through the night. I finally had words for what was happening. Kara stood before the wall for a long time. Dominic came to stand beside her. You built this? He said. No, she replied. We did. He looked at the messages, then at her. We helped. They are the ones who kept going. Kara nodded. Yes, they are. Just after midnight, the room filled with cheers, hugs, clinking glasses, and tired laughter. Kara was pulled into photographs, kissed on the cheek by support workers, and made to wear a crooked gold paper crown. Dominic watched her from across the room. She looked exhausted, but genuinely happy. She looked, for once, less like someone on alert for the next crisis, and more like someone who knew she was unconditionally cared about and supported. They returned to Kara's house just before dawn on New Year's Day. The dark sky seemed expectant, already holding the sun's promise to rise again. The streets were almost empty, the world wrapped in that rare early morning quiet that made even ordinary things seem newly made. Kara looked up through the sunroof of Dominic's car, searching for signs of early sunlight. Dawn seemed to whisper, "Be patient. However dark the night, I will come." Behind the clouds, the sun is shining, she thought. How many times had she said those words to her brave-hearted warriors when they had lost hope? Kara slipped off her shoes at the kitchen door and leaned against the counter while Dominic filled the kettle. Marmalade appeared from nowhere, complained loudly about their absence, and then immediately forgave them when Kara filled his bowl. Dominic set 2 mugs on the small table beside the kitchen sofa, and they sat close together. For a while, neither of them spoke. They were too tired for speeches and too full of everything the year had carried. The fear, the fight, the hearings, the headlines, the letters from patients, and the unexpected tenderness of finding each other in the middle of it all. Kara wrapped both hands around her mug. What are you hoping for this year, Dom? Dominic sat opposite her and considered the question. A quieter world, he said at last. One where fewer people have to fight so hard to be believed. Kara's smile faded into something softer. That would be enough. And you? He asked. She looked down at their hands, resting close together on the kitchen table. Then she reached for his. I think, she said, I am hoping to stop bracing for the next battle long enough to enjoy what has already been won. Dominic turned her hand gently in his. Then we'll practice. Kara raised an eyebrow. Practice? Yes, you teach the world how to heal. I'll teach you how to be looked after. She shook her head, but her eyes filled. I've been the lighthouse for so long, Dom. I don't mean that as though I'm a martyr or anything like that, but everyone looks to me for the way home. Before you, nobody ever thought to check if the lighthouse was cold. It will take some getting used to, but I thank you for your warmth. Outside, the morning opened slowly over the quiet street. Inside, the kettle ticked as it cooled. Marmalade settled deeply into gravity across Dominic's foot, and the first light of dawn rested gently around them. For once, neither Kara nor Dominic hurried to answer anything. They simply sat together, hand in hand, while the first day of the new year arrived with promise.